Remember back in the 2000s when you'd see a brand new game release on Xbox or PlayStation, get hyped watching trailers, and then pick it up on something like a Game Boy or a Nintendo DS, only to realize it was a completely different game? Same name, same cover art, but instead of a full 3D experience, you were getting some stripped-back 2D platformer that barely resembled what you thought you were buying. That exact same thing happened when mobile gaming started taking off. Before smartphones became the standard, most games were built using Java, designed to run on a massive range of devices with wildly different specs because they were usually much simpler, often 2D, sometimes top-down, but still tied to bigger franchises. And even once smartphones came around, these versions didn't just disappear. Developers like Gameloft kept making them alongside their bigger 3D titles for years. One of the franchises in question was N.O.V.A, Gameloft's attempt to bring Halo to mobile, with 3 Java games based around the franchise that continue releasing all the way up to 2017. In this video, I'm going to take a specific deep dive into each one and understand what they had to offer, how they compare to each other, and shine some light on some often forgotten versions of the franchise that you never hear anyone talk about. A quick heads up though, because these versions are so different from their 3D counterparts, I'm not going to directly compare them side by side. Instead, I'm going to go through each game level by level and focus how it plays as its own experience. Of course, to get a better understanding, I would absolutely recommend checking out my previous retrospectives on the N.O.V.A franchise to see for yourself just how similar or different each entry is to their Java equivalents. But before we get into it, this video is actually sponsored by Jogos. So Jogos is this online website/app that you can get, where essentially it has over 1,000 games that you can play at the click of a button. It sort of reminds me of back in the day when you used to play flash games like Miniclip, and you'd be able to just scroll through the list and click on something and start playing it within seconds. Sort of feels like the modern version of that. With my time on the website, I played a few different games. There was this racing one, which at first glance looked a little bit like a knockoff Asphalt. However, it was pretty fun and very fast-paced. There was this sniper game where you basically sit up at the top of a tower and you try and take out zombies that are approaching your gate. And then there was also this Fruit Ninja sort of clone type thing, which, basically just plays the same as Fruit Ninja, but it was good fun to play as well. But definitely I would recommend giving it a go. There's also sections on the left where you can choose what's popular at the moment, what's new, and then also there's categories if you want to pick a specific one, like a puzzle game or a racing game, action game, whatever it is. But I'll put a link in the description and in the comments as well, so definitely jump in if you just want a few quick minutes when you're on the bus to play something. But thank you so much to Jogos for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the topic at hand. Starting off at the first, N.O.V.A, aka Near Orbit Vanguard Alliance, released as a 2D Java game in 2011. And yes, that's 2 years after the original game had come out, and up to a year after the release of N.O.V.A 2. Weirdly enough, despite the game just being called N.O.V.A, the plot is almost comparable to its sequel as well, and even goes as far as using N.O.V.A 2's title screen for its main menu. Jumping straight into the game, you're given a quick bit of context as to what's going on, along with some light backstory. The game kicks off with Cal arriving at a space station that's being completely overrun by aliens. As you move through the opening section, trying to regroup with your squad, an explosion goes off, nearly sending you out into space. After making your way back inside through the landing area, you run into another N.O.V.A soldier and begin assisting him. He explains that his squad had been pinned down, so you push forward together, taking out the enemies as you move through the corridors. Before long, you reach the rest of the squad and jump into a nearby turret to help clear out a wave of enemies attacking the area. Once that's dealt with, you pretty much just leave them behind and continue pushing deeper into the station. As you climb further through the level, you're introduced to the first sync room, which acts as an upgrade station. This is where the game really starts to separate itself from the 3D versions. Rather than being a straight shooter like those games, this version leans much more into a Metroid-style structure with abilities that you unlock throughout the level to help you progress. The first major upgrade is the Chain Lightning ability, which allows you to grapple onto these blue orbs scattered around the environment. It's also where you first see Cal doing front flips everywhere, which is apparently something he can do. Alongside these grapple points, there are also swinging orbs that let you cross larger gaps, although everything here is very context sensitive. You're not really choosing how to use these abilities, the game triggers them exactly when it wants you to. Continuing through the station, you eventually head back outside, where you have to dodge asteroids and laser fire while making your way across to the other side. You then reach an elevator, but it's powered down, meaning you'll have to restore power before you can use it. On the way to do that though, you encounter your first mini-boss type enemy, These fights are fairly simple. You shoot at them while dodging their attacks, and once they're weak enough, you can jump on top and perform a finishing move to take them out. After reaching the control room and restoring power, you make your way back to the elevator, and the first level comes to an end. The next level continues through the space station, starting at the very bottom of the elevator as you push through more corridors filled with enemies. Early on, you're introduced to an anti-gravity mechanic, where activating certain switches flips you between the floor and the ceiling. It's a simple idea, but it adds a bit of variety to the platforming and helps keep things from feeling too repetitive. As you continue forward, you fight through more enemies and eventually reach another control room, where a self-destruct sequence is triggered, forcing you to make your way out quickly. This leads into another escape section, dodging hazards and manning another turret before eventually finding an elevator that takes you up to meet more of your squad. Unfortunately, they don't last very long as a large mech enemy shows up and wipes them out almost immediately. This leads into another boss fight where, just like before, you dodge its attacks and slowly take it down. Once defeated, you're given your next objective, heading to a factory on a nearby planet that's been taken over by aliens. Cal and Yelena head down to the planet but end up crash landing on arrival. From here, you're tasked with destroying 3 devices to disable the facility's security system. As you move through the factory, you make use of the grapple ability and eventually reach an R&D section where you meet up with more members of your squad. You very briefly team up to clear out enemies before destroying the first of the 3 devices. Continuing forward, you reach another sync room, which gives you the ability to reflect enemy projectiles. This becomes necessary for dealing with shielded enemies, where you have to wait for them to attack before sending their projectiles back to them. You then move through a section where a laser chases you up a vertical corridor before reaching and destroying the second device. From there, you access the factory's information system, introducing a small hacking-style mechanic where you control a rolling spear to redirect lasers and open paths forward. After moving your way through more rooms, you reach the third and final device and destroy it, before taking down a nearby computer system. Shortly after, you're confronted by an alien leader, who reveals that General Arkin has been captured. With that, the objective shifts once again, now focusing on rescuing him. Cal makes his way towards the alien city, traveling there via a jetpack section where you're dodging obstacles and enemies while flying through space and alien structures. Along the way, you meet another soldier and work together to hold off waves of enemies before eventually reaching the city itself. This area is a bit of a change visually, with Cal jumping between flying vehicles and navigating vertical sections of the city using elevators. Eventually, you find General Arkin, who is just sitting alone in a corridor. Of course, there is a catch though. He's been rigged with a bomb. This triggers an escape sequence where you have to carry him out of the city before it detonates. You manage to make it back to your ship, where Yelena is able to disarm it, and the mission continues. From here, you gain access to the electromagnetic glove, which allows you to climb along certain surfaces, adding another traversal mechanic to the mix. You also encounter more hacking-style sections, where you control what is essentially an RC car, navigating across laser wires to reach the other side. Occasionally, you'll have to switch between the top and the bottom sections, or jump across gaps to reach the other side and allow Cal to teleport to you. Eventually, you confront the alien leader in a boss fight, where you once again focus on dodging attacks while dealing damage. Just as things escalate, you're suddenly teleported away by Yelena, interrupting the fight. You're then tasked with reaching a signal station so HQ can locate you, leading into a new icy environment. Here, you have to avoid falling icicles while also using them as platforms to move around. As you progress, you make your way through a base, eventually reaching the signal station and allowing your team to track your location. However, extraction isn't possible just yet, so you're given another objective, reaching the central data hub. Along the way, you unlock more abilities through sync rooms, including a ground smash move to break ice blocks, and a freeze weapon that lets you stop moving platforms in place to help with traversal. After reaching the data hub and downloading the required information, you make your way to the extraction point. However, during your escape, your ship is shot down, introducing a new threat, a large worm-like creature. You're forced to move towards a nearby research station while repeatedly encountering the creature, dodging its attacks and shooting it to keep it at bay. Eventually, this leads to a proper boss fight against the worm, where you focus on targeting its weak points while avoiding its attacks. Once defeated, the game doesn't really explain how you leave the planet, and instead just transitions straight to the next mission. From here, the game jumps back to the alien city, starting with another jetpack section that transitions into a freefall sequence. At the bottom, you confront the alien leader again, but this time the encounter plays out in a cutscene rather than gameplay. This is where it's revealed that the aliens have actually been working with the humans, specifically the President and General Arkin. With that twist, Yelena and Cal set out to stop him, leading to the final mission. You begin with piloting a ship, firing down at enemies below, before landing and making your way through the base using all the mechanics you've unlocked so far. This includes grapple points, conveyor systems, and platforming sections that all require precise timing. You eventually reach the central area, regroup with your squad, and confront General Arkin, who sends out a stronger version of the mech enemies that you've already fought. After taking it down, Yelena activates a self-destruct sequence, and you make one final escape from the facility as everything collapses around you. And with that, the game just kind of ends. There's no real final cutscene or clear resolution. The credits roll, and a lot of the story is left pretty vague. Overall, the plot feels more like a way to push you from level to level, rather than something you're actually meant to get deeply invested in. It's this weird mix between Nova 2 and Nova 1's plot, with its own unique plot points mixed in there as well, which once again raises the question of why this wasn't just branded as a Nova 2 Java release. In terms of gameplay though, this was actually a pretty tough experience. I played on normal difficulty, and between the high enemy damage, the low frame rate, and slightly unresponsive controls, I probably died at least 50 times through the playthrough. That said, when everything is working properly, it was actually a pretty fun game. The constant introduction of new mechanics kept things feeling fresh, and the Metroid-style progression works surprisingly well for this format. And because most abilities are context-sensitive, there isn't much room for different approaches. You're largely playing the game exactly how it wants you to. But for a 2011 Java game designed for very limited hardware, it's genuinely impressive. It feels very similar to something you'd get on a Game Boy at the time, and as someone who never really experienced these Java games growing up, it was actually really cool to go back and see what they had to offer. Next up, we have Nova 3, which seems to be the standout favorite when it comes to the Java trilogy. Just like the first game, each mission kicks off with a quick text breakdown of the objective, followed by a short cutscene to set the scene. In this case, Cal crash lands in the side of a building as he arrives, before being tasked with trying to get the city's defenses back online. Right away, you can see a pretty major improvement over the first game. The visuals are sharper, the animations are smoother, and everything just feels a lot more responsive. Cal now has a full range of movement as well, including a dodge roll, which makes avoiding enemy fire and obstacles feel much more fluid compared to before. As you push through the opening level, you're reintroduced to combat, grenades, and the grapple ability, which also feels noticeably smoother this time around. Enemies also begin dropping these blue, crystal-like pickups when defeated, which seems to just recharge your power meter, although the game also tracks how many you collect, which makes it feel like a currency, but I don't think there's any way to spend them. Before long, you reach your first sync station, returning from the previous game, this time unlocking the Force Wave ability. Essentially a force push that can knock enemies back, deal damage, and interact with certain environmental objects. You continue pushing through the city, taking out enemies and encountering a larger mini-boss type enemy, which once again follows the same pattern as before. Shoot, dodge, and then finish it off with the takedown once it's weak enough. After checking in with Yelena, it becomes clear that the Volterites have already taken control of the city's defenses, and there's no real way to bring them back online. She suggests pulling out, but just before Cal can do that, an explosion sends him flying out of the building, transitioning to a falling section where you're dodging enemies and obstacles on the way down. Landing safely on the streets below, you come across another Nova soldier and escort them back to the rest of the team, protecting him along the way. Once you arrive, you jump into a mounted turret and help clear out the area so a dropship can land and extract everyone. From here, the game introduces a completely new mechanic, ship piloting. Cal takes control of the ship, flying through space while dodging lasers, avoiding asteroids, and taking out enemy ships along the way. It's fairly simple, but it does a good job of breaking up the gameplay and adding some variety early on. The next mission takes place aboard the Judge's ship Therius, where Cal is searching for the terraforming devices. Not long after arriving, you're introduced to Mazra, and their interaction plays out very similarly to what we see in the 3D version. Mazra claims to know where the artifact is, but needs help reclaiming the ship from the aliens first. So the two agree to work together. As you push through Therius, you'll run into a mix of enemies, platforming sections, and puzzle mechanics. The anti-gravity switches from the first game return here, allowing you to flip between the floor and the ceiling. And you're also introduced to a new mechanic where you can control a small robot to activate switches and clear the path forward. Partway through, the ship is breached, forcing you to move quickly to avoid being sucked out into space. You continue navigating through lasers, moving platforms and enemies, before eventually running into a mech, which you take down just like in the previous game. This time though, you're able to take control of the mech itself, using it to stomp through enemies and blast your way through the rest of the level. That allows the mech to fire projectiles, making it even more powerful. Eventually, you reach the control room, reclaim the ship, and Mazra hands over the artifact, with Cal heading off to Boreas to track down the second one. The next mission begins on the back of a moving vehicle, where you're blasting through enemies during a desert storm. Before long, you're knocked off and forced to continue on foot, introducing a range of new hazards like landmines, quicksand, and conveyor belts that move you in certain directions. As you continue through the level, Mazra suddenly reappears and betrays you. He knocks you into a pit and sends an enemy after you. After a short encounter with him, he escapes, leaving you to continue forward through a sandstorm section where you're dodging obstacles, fighting enemies, and trying not to get pulled into the storm itself. Eventually, you catch up with Mazra again, triggering a quick boss encounter before he retreats once more, now heading to Voltron. Following him there, you're introduced to some new enemy types, including dog-like creatures that resemble the Cybertooth/Cyberteeth creatures seen in the mainline games. This level also introduces environmental hazards like lava pits and volcanic eruptions that you need to time to move around. You fight your way through the area to reach a control room, only to discover that the artifact has already been taken off-world. Activating the system alerts the enemies to your presence, forcing you to escape before being overwhelmed, with Yelena arriving to extract you. You then return to Boreas to continue the chase, where another new mechanic is introduced, the ability to slow down time, allowing you to navigate through fast-moving hazards that would otherwise be impossible to avoid. As you progress, you once again encounter a mech, take it down, and then take control of one yourself to push through the level. Reaching another control point, you learn that Mazra has already left again, but his next destination is revealed, allowing you to continue the pursuit. This leads you back to Therius once again, where you move through the ship, solving puzzles and fighting enemies while catching glimpses of Mazra ahead of you, only for him to continue escaping each time you get close. Eventually, he teleports back to Earth, forcing you to follow him once again. Back in San Francisco, the level begins with you controlling a mech, blasting your way through the streets before transitioning into platforming sections using a jetpack to cross large gaps. There's also the sequence where you're sliding down collapsing streets while shooting enemies, which is surprisingly cinematic for a Java game. After regrouping and continuing the chase, you eventually catch up to Mazra once again, only for him to escape, now heading back to his homeworld to activate the artifact. This leads to another ship section where you're flying through space, dodging obstacles and chasing Mazra directly while under fire from enemy ships. Finally, you arrive back on Voltron for the final confrontation. You face off against Mazra in a boss fight, but before you can finish him, an alien creature intervenes, destroying the platform beneath you and sending you into the final battle of the game. Here, you fight the creature by targeting its weak points while dodging a variety of attacks, including tail strikes, lasers, and an area of effect blast. Once it's defeated, Cal escapes, and much like the first game, things wrap up pretty quickly from here. You get a short message confirming that Mazra has been defeated and that Earth has been saved, along with a small nod to the 3D version where Cal is rewarded with a H7 moon. And with that, the credits roll. Overall, this was a much stronger experience than the first Java game. It builds directly on what was introduced previously, carrying over most of the mechanics while refining them and adding new ideas along the way. The gameplay feels smoother, the controls are more responsive, and the variety across each level keeps things consistently engaging. The story also follows N.O.V.A 3 a lot more closely, even if it takes some liberties with how it plays out, particularly with Mazra's role in the plot. If there's one downside though, it's that the constant jumping between locations can make the pacing feel a little disjointed at times. I would have preferred if you played multiple levels in the one planet before moving on to the next, rather than going back and forth between planets on repeat. But outside of that, it's pretty easy to see why this is the version that most people remember so fondly. And finally, we've got N.O.V.A Legacy. As is standard, the game kicks off with a quick description of the mission ahead, with the first one giving you a bit of backstory about what's going on. You have a quick chat to Yelena, who explains that Cal's mission is to board the Colonial Pride. Cal is of course reluctant due to being retired, but he doesn't really have much choice in the matter. Before long, the ship is very quickly shot out of the sky, but luckily he crash lands right into Colonial Pride. That was lucky. Now, with this game coming out in 2017, you can definitely see a nice improvement in the visuals and animations once again, but it's nothing too crazy for the time that it released. And of course, with this being a Java game, every version that I tried had some sort of issue. The one I was using here didn't seem to have pretty much any audio at all, except for very specific moments, so I'll just have some background music here. Before long, you run into a massive enemy holding one of your N.O.V.A soldiers captive, and you're introduced with these sort of quick-time events where you need to press a specific button or perform an action in order to proceed. Now, because a lot of this game is very similar to both N.O.V.A 1 and N.O.V.A 3, I'm going to skip through a lot of the familiar stuff, like many of the shootouts and platforming sections, so we can get to what's actually different here. The sync stations are still present, with the first one giving you the chain lightning ability, allowing you to grapple onto walls. You then man a turret to take out some enemies, help the N.O.V.A soldier through to the next room, give him a first aid kit, and send him on his way. General Korolev patches through the comms and gives you some new orders. Find the self-destruct code, blow up the ship, and get out of there. Heading down an elevator and climbing up the walls, you're introduced to your first new weapon, the shotgun. You reach a terminal to unlock the door and proceed. And while working through this terminal to retrieve the self-destruct code, you're interrupted by the same enemies from before, which once again leads to a mini boss fight where you need to shoot and dodge his attacks before you can perform a finisher. With him defeated, you obtain the self-destruct codes and the level ends. The next level kicks off with Prometheus chiming in for the first time in the 2D trilogy, basically just to introduce himself and let him know he'll call you later. Pushing further on, a gravity manipulation device is activated, flipping you up onto the roof and giving you access to your own reverse gravity device. This is easily one of the coolest features in this game compared to the others. Instead of having fixed areas where you need to flip onto roofs, you now have the ability to flip gravity at will. For example, if there's a trap above you, you can flip gravity and send the Xenos flying into the ceiling to take them out. In some sections, like this mini boss fight, you're actually required to flip the gravity and send the enemy into electricity in order to break his shield before you can deal any damage. You find another sync room, giving you access to the airwave ability from N.O.V.A 3, which is basically just that force push, and once again it's used here to push blocks around to allow you to progress. You can also use it in certain situations to take enemies out with environmental objects, like this box here. Now, while I missed it in the first level, this is actually where I found that the game includes collectibles, being these extra pieces of armor that you can equip, which provide permanent upgrades to your character. It's a nice little incentive to go off the beaten path, as well as adding some replay value to encourage you to revisit levels. Eventually, you reach the control room and are introduced to a proper hacking puzzle, which is another first for the 2D trilogy. This one essentially has you playing Wordle, where you need to input 3 numbers. Each time you guess, you're given indicators in the form of colors, red meaning the number isn't in the code at all, yellow meaning that the code is there but in the wrong position, and green meaning it's correct. You've got a limited number of attempts to figure it out. With the computer hacked, the self-destruct sequence is initiated, and Cal gets the hell out of there. You then have a sequence where you're escaping the Pride, using everything you've learnt so far, from anti-gravity to the shockwave, and even the lightning gun. You're then given access to the magnetic gloves, a feature introduced in N.O.V.A 3, allowing you to grab onto ceilings and traverse across them. Taking control of another turret and working your way across the loading bay, an explosion goes off and you're forced to run away from a wall of flames chasing you down. Just in time, Cal makes it back to his ship and escapes. This is where the game takes an interesting turn into what is essentially a Galaga-style section, where your goal is to fly through space, shooting down enemies and dodging asteroids. You can also pick up upgrades like a triple beam or an AoE explosion that clears everything on screen. Except in my case, whenever I tried to use this AoE explosion, the game crashed. Unfortunately, every single time that I tried this, whether being restarting the game, restarting my phone, reloading the level from scratch, every time that I would use this ability, the game would just completely hard crash. I'm not too sure if it was the phone or the version I was using, but I just couldn't get past this section. So, instead, I switched over to a vertical version of the game to see if that would work. The game itself is essentially identical, just reformatted for the vertical screen, so I quickly sped through everything to get back to where I was. Arriving back at the same point, you continue to the space station, picking up the shields, health, and upgrades, before eventually reaching what is essentially a boss ship. You need to dodge its attacks and destroy specific parts of it, but only after taking out one section, it retreats. But somehow, Cal's ship catches fire and he crash lands on a nearby planet. Arriving down below, General Korolev chimes in to let you know that there are actually some Nova soldiers on the planet that need a bit of help. So you begin pushing your way through the jungle to meet them. Another new mechanic is introduced here with these small zip lines that you can ride down, as well as the return of the chains from Nova 3 that pull you upwards. Both of these allow you to shoot while moving, meaning that you're often being attacked mid-transition, which keeps things a bit more engaging. Climbing along these monkey bars, you end up walking straight into a trap and are set down into the water below, shooting anything that comes into view as you drop. An N.O.V.A soldier nearby has a device on his body that is picking up a signal, indicating that someone is still alive. So you push forward and head deeper down, and walk straight into the ambush of Xeno soldiers before making a quick escape to the end of the level. Sliding down another zipline, you eventually manage to connect with the N.O.V.A soldier in question, who mentions that they're trapped in a cave and need assistance. Cal heads in that direction, sliding down more walls and waterfalls until you finally locate the soldier, who goes by the name of Bones. He explains that he was sent to find a creature on this island that was not very happy to be found. He blows open a nearby passageway within the caves, allowing you to proceed. Not long after, you come across another fallen N.O.V.A soldier with some information regarding the beast in question, described as some sort of tiger. A second datapad is required to get more details. Continuing forward, you drop down another waterfall and reach the second datapad, where you're also introduced to the creature itself. Deciding not to confront it just yet, you instead take the new information and get out of there. With the datapad in hand, Yelena explains that the tiger is similar to a saber-toothed tiger, but you'll need some more information before taking it on. Another N.O.V.A group is mentioned as well, so your new objective becomes finding them to see what they know. After pushing through the jungle for a few more minutes, you pick up a signal from the final team and make your way down to meet with them. After protecting them from an incoming wave of Xenos, they reward you with some C4, along with a tooth from the tiger. With the tooth in hand, Yelena is able to identify the creature as a cyber-tooth. Alongside that, she is also able to craft a new type of ammo that allows you to pierce through the armor of the beast. With that now in possession, Cal tracks down the creature and engages in a boss fight. Occasionally, it will jump behind the bushes, requiring you to shoot it to flush it out. Doing so will send it lunging directly at you, forcing you to dodge before getting in a few shots of your own. Eventually, the creature is defeated. After examining the body, Yelena identifies a foreign mineral present in its bloodstream, with a nearby mining facility potentially holding more answers. Cal is then tasked with heading there to investigate before more of these creatures begin to appear. Back in space, Level 8 has you playing through another Galaga-style section, functioning almost the same as before. However, this time there's a massive meteor storm standing between you and the mining facility. After just barely making it through, you're introduced to the mini-boss from earlier. He attempts to plant some doubts in Cal's mind before delivering what is honestly an incredible line. After defeating him once again, he retreats before you can finish him off, ending the level. Now, something that's interesting about this section is that while it originally existed in N.O.V.A 1 back in 2009, the entire ice mining facility segment was actually removed from N.O.V.A Legacy in 2017, so it's pretty cool to see it back in the 2D release to keep the original story intact. You're quickly reunited with a group of N.O.V.A soldiers, however these ones aren't exactly friendly. It turns out that some of the N.O.V.A soldiers have been taken over by the Xenos and are now working alongside them, introducing a new enemy type. Before moving through the mine and sliding down these icy slopes, you're confronted with another quick mini-boss before picking up a flamethrower. This flamethrower allows you to melt ice walls to progress through certain areas, and of course it can be used as a weapon, although its ammo is fairly limited. You then come across a N.O.V.A soldier executing another before collapsing into a pile of crystals. The game explains that it's actually these crystals controlling the N.O.V.A soldiers, rather than a parasite like seen in the original game. Fascinating. Pushing further into the mine, you come across soldiers transporting these crystals through a portal. Naturally, you follow them through, ending the level. After taking out those said soldiers in question, they drop a datapad mentioning something called a mind mech, which these crystals are being used to power. Moving through the mine using these new platforms, you continue forward, well, or try to, anyway, because this is where things unfortunately got stuck again. For some reason, there should be a transition here allowing you to move on to the next screen, but it just refused to activate. So once again, I had to switch versions. I don't know what it is about N.O.V.A Legacy, but it definitely doesn't seem to work as well as I would hope. But I wasn't really ready to restart the whole game again, so luckily someone by the name of Tiago Mega 2 uploaded a full long play of this exact version of the game back in the day. So massive shout out to them for saving me from having to replay this game for the third time. Picking back up using that footage, you continue through the level, eventually coming across ice that begins to collapse beneath you as you walk across it. Aside from one QuickTime event, this section is essentially a cinematic sequence until the ice gives way and you fall down below, shooting enemies as you descend. Reaching the bottom, you navigate more platforms before finding another portal. You attempt to stop a N.O.V.A soldier from entering, but he slips through before you can intervene. Promethekins chimes in to let you know that the mine mech may not actually be the final piece of the puzzle. Moments later, you run into a mech and face off against it in another boss fight. The mechanics are very similar to N.O.V.A 3. Crouch to avoid its attacks and fire back when you can. With it defeated, Cal assumes his job here is done, but clearly that is not the case. Continuing on, you encounter more Xenos, transporting crystals through another portal. And once again, you follow through to find out what's going on. After a few minutes of platforming, combat, and traversal, you come across a section where platforms are unpowered, requiring you to reach a terminal to restore functionality. Using the newly activated platforms, you continue downward, grab another flamethrower, then proceed through another ice section. Eventually, you ambush a Xeno and question what's happening. He reveals that the crystals are being sent to the Xeno's homeworld to build a superweapon known as the Guardian System. Before long, another mind mech appears, leading to another boss fight with the same mechanics as before. With the mech defeated, Cal prepares to destroy the crystal, but Prometheus steps in and explains that the only real solution is to enter the portal and destroy what's being built on the other side. Yelena arrives to extract Cal, but General Korolev shows up with the N.O.V.A soldiers, ordering him to destroy the portal. Cal refuses, the soldiers open fire, and he narrowly escapes by flying straight through the portal. The enemy ship from earlier returns, introducing himself as Clyde from Starship Academy. And yeah, the dialogue here is a little bit odd. It feels like he's trying to be funny, but it doesn't really quite land. I'm not too sure what the point of this character was, because as far as I know, he was never mentioned in any other game, but of course, if I have that wrong, please let me know. Anyway, after defeating him, Cal crash lands on the Xeno's homeworld and tries to get in contact with Yelena. Unfortunately, General Korolev intercepts the call, informing him that Yelena has been decommissioned, and that Cal will be next once they find him. Shortly after, you encounter Prometheus being held captive. After rescuing him, you obtain a plasma gun, a new weapon that allows you to charge up shots to deal heavy damage and break enemy armor. You then make your way to more platforming sections, eventually regrouping with Prometheus. He explains that he's also an AI, just like Yelena, and was stationed aboard the Vanguard, a sister ship to the Pride, investigating the minerals before crashing. Unfortunately, the system they're dealing with is too powerful to destroy directly. From here, you're given the option to choose between two portals, each leading to different paths. Reaching the generator room, you're introduced to another new puzzle mechanic involving mirrors, where you need to redirect a laser beam to destroy the generator. With that done, you move into the final boss encounter, the Guardian. Honestly, this thing is pretty terrifying, and easily one of the best bosses in the entire N.O.V.A franchise, despite the limitations of the gameplay. It's this massive mech-like creature that requires you to dodge a variety of attacks while targeting weak points. At a couple of points throughout the fight, the floor collapses beneath you, dropping you to a lower level, though the fight itself remains largely the same, aside from a few added attacks. Eventually, the Guardian is defeated, and you'd assume that's the end of it. But, of course, it's not. General Korolev and the N.O.V.A soldiers arrive to take you in. But at the last moment, Prometheus intervenes. Cal is left free, with Korolev and the crew sent to death for what they've done. And with that, the game comes to an end. Looking at the trilogy as a whole, it's honestly kind of impressive how much these games manage to do with their limitations. They're not just stripped-down versions of the originals. Each one takes the core ideas of N.O.V.A and reshapes them into something that actually works in a completely different format. Sometimes that means simplifying things, Sometimes it means changing them entirely, and occasionally it even results in something that feels fresh in its own right. The first game is definitely the roughest, more of a loose interpretation than a proper adaptation, but it still lays the groundwork for what's to come. N.O.V.A 3 builds on that in a big way, delivering the most complete experience of the three, while Legacy sits in this interesting middle ground, blending old and new into something that feels both familiar and a little bit different. And I think that's what makes these so interesting to look back on. They're a reminder of a time where mobile games weren't trying to just match console experiences, they were trying to reinterpret them entirely, finding ways to make the same ideas work within completely different limitations. And even if these versions were never the main way people experienced N.O.V.A, they're still a pretty fascinating part of its history. Thanks for watching.